Hi, it's Matt Bisogno from ggs.co.uk, and with the start of the National Hunt season proper just around the corner, I thought now was a great time to look at 5 form hacks you can put to work with GG's Gold. Let's go to it. So these 5 hacks are supposed to be time saving for you, and regardless of the amount of time you've got, you'll be able to put at least some of these to use for you. Now, it's my suggestion that whether you have a small amount of time or some hours, it's always good discipline to check the weather forecast before you start, and not just what the weather has been, but what it's likely to be between when you're looking and when the races are off. So as an example, today I'm looking at Carlisle here, and we can see this is on the British Horse Racing website here. We can see that they've had 30 millimetres of rain since midnight. 30 mil is 3 centimetres, so that's over an inch of rain. And we can see that the forecast is for passing showers for the rest of the day. So they're currently calling it good to soft in places on the chase course, and soft heavy in places on the hurdle course. They haven't updated the going stick readings since Monday, which is disappointing. But I think we can assume with the rain forecast for the rest of the day that it's probably going to be soft on the chase course and heavy on the hurdle course, and I'd certainly be working on that basis. It's worth using weather radars to see where the rain is now and the speed it's travelling at, to try to work out a little bit more accurately whether you're going to get rain. Now, talking about this, as with everything in this video, talking about it takes longer to do than actually doing the stuff. So this checking the going and checking the weather should take no more than 30 seconds per meeting if you've saved these pages as bookmarks, as I have. So that's what I always do before I start. Now let's look at hack number 1, which is shortlist each way. Now, this is not really intended to be an end in itself. You can use it that way, but I would recommend using it as a starting point and going and looking at the form in more detail. So I've clicked on the reports menu item, and you'll see that across the top of the page is a list of the reports, and also on the page a list of the reports. I'm going to go to the shortlist, which is here. You can also find it here. And from that report, you can see that we've got a list of horse names, odds, and a green, amber, red, grey status for each of going, class, course, distance and field size. And each of these rows, these colour-coded rows, gives the horse a total score from the individual scores. If you want to know the detail there, it's down on the page, so you can read that for yourself. But a line of green is worth 15. So you can look at these, but what I want to show you here, which I think is kind of an underused is the place tab. And we've got exactly the same view, except that the data generated in this perspective is based on a horse's each way or place performance rather than its win performance. Now, if we sort on the odds column, you can see that there are horses that are short prices, not really each way prices, and it's not recommended to bet these horses each way, but they might be good place pot horses or exacta, trifecta type horses. Regardless of the bet that you intend to potentially place these runners in, as I said already, I recommend that you do some further digging into the form profiles of those horses. So what I do with the place shortlist when I'm looking at that is I sort by odds highest to lowest, and I'm interested in horses that are big prices but have quite a good profile fit against today's race conditions. Now, one of the things to bear in mind with the shortlist is that it's generated overnight, and it uses, so the class and the course and the distance won't change, but field size can change if non-runners happen, and non-runners often happen because the going changes because of, as with last night, rainfall. for instance, changing the going from good to soft to heavy. So the going and field size components can change since the time the report is generated, and that's something to be aware of. In any case, this horse is 25 to 1, and that's attractive because it's a big price. But is it a big price because the horse has no chance? Potentially not. Let's have a look. So if I click on the race time, it's going to take me to the 120, which is a 0 to 120 conditional jockey's handicap hurdle, and we can see that Applaus is 25 in a place, but generally 18 to 1. Let's have a look at Applaus's recent form. You see a couple of places, not so good the last twice. Older horse than, well, all of his or her rivals, his rivals. If we look at the recent form, we can see that Applaus finished well beaten on heavy ground at Perth last time. That was over 2 miles. This is over 2.5 miles, and we can see that these two poorer runs were at the 2 mile trip, whereas these two nearly winning runs, third and second, were at this 2.5 mile trip. Interesting. And of course this aligns with what we've seen on the shortlist report, where it says that the distance is a promising element. If we look at Instant Expert, and I set my Instant Expert up differently from the shortlist, so I have to change a number of the boxes here to reflect that. We can now see that Applaus has this amber green look. I've changed the going to heavy. It would have been soft overnight, so again that's something that I've done, but we can see that Applaus has performed pretty well under these conditions, and particularly at this track, Carlisle, where his last 4 runs since this time last year was second, first, second. The second here was off 109, same mark as today. This jockey, Emma Smith-Chaston, who's a very good jockey in these races, has ridden the last 3 times. So this is an interesting horse. It's 25 to 1. It might run like a 25 to 1 chance. That's always the caveat when we're backing big prices. They can run as though they're a big price, but 25 to 1 implies a 4% chance of winning. If we look at this form profile, we'd probably be inclined to give this horse more than a 4% chance. If we change the time period to 2 years, we can see that that's not doing much at all to dissuade us from the fact that conditions look very well suited for Applaus. As I say, might run badly, but it's a 25 to 1 shot. This is form hack number 1, and it's the shortlist place. Form hack number 2 is T-Snips with filters. T-Snips is another report, also known as trainer snippets. You can find it up here, trainer snips. Click on that, and this is a kind of a multidisciplinary report, if you like, in that it's got a number of different buttons, each of which displays a different report angle or trainer angle. So for instance, if I click the distance move button, this is showing the trainers whose horses are moving up in distance by a certain amount today. And again, underneath the report you can get all the detail on exactly how horses qualify to be on this report. Now what I want to do is I want to filter this data, so you can see that there is a lot of data on here. We can't possibly use this sensibly or usefully, but what we can do is we can use these filters at the top. If you're looking at just one meeting today, if you're only looking at Carlisle, click the Carlisle button, and you're going to get the subset of trainers whose runners are at Carlisle today. For instance, this is Laura Fowler, I think. She's an Irish trainer, so it's interesting that she has a couple at Carlisle today. I'm not only interested in Carlisle, I'm interested in all tracks, But what I do want to do is I want to whittle down this massive number of trainer snippet angles to a more meaningful size. So to do that, I'm going to use these from 2 boxes at the top here. I'm going to say I want at least 15 runners in my sample. I want a win percent of 25% or more. I'm kind of looking for horses that might win. And I'm going to say actual over expected of 1 and an impact value of 1 and a percentage of rivals beaten of 55% or more. If you want to know more about these metrics, just Google GG's metrics and you'll find a page that explains what all these numbers are and why they're important and why you should use them. Anyway, this is how I've set this up. I'm going to click the update button now, and hey presto, we now have a much shorter shortlist of potential angles. So we've got one first start angle, Paul Nicholls. We can see that all of these data in this report relate to the last 2 years, so that's something to keep in mind. It's good and current. And we can see that in the last 2 years Paul Nicholls has run a horse for the first time in UK or Ireland under rules 84 times, and 28 of those, which is exactly 1 in 3, a third, 33.33%, have won, and nearly 60% of them have placed. Now at starting price that's a tiny loss, and I'm guessing at Betfair starting price it's going to be a small profit. These horses win a lot, they're reliable, they're interesting horses, and if you click on the trainer name you'll get the name of the horse in question, its current odds, not massively attractive but reasonable enough I suppose in the context of what we know. If you want to know the 84 horses in question, click this little up arrow here and it's going to bring up these rows of data here. There are 84 of these rows of data, 1 each for every one of Paul Nicholls' first time starters in the last 2 years. You can filter this data, you can sort it. So for instance this race is at Wincanton, so if we click on course twice, because W is near the end of the alphabet, we can get the Wincanton runners, and we can see that he's had a couple of sorry, that's Weatherby. He's had just the 1 winner at Wincanton, which was a 5-4 shot like this one, and a few beaten at short odds as well. We can also sort by starting price, and if we go past the very short ones and look at this kind of odds range, we can see that most of them, in fact most of the fancied runners making their first start for Nicholls have won, and then as you get further away from the top of the market, so the winning rate diminishes, which we would expect. That would be the same for pretty much any trainer. But the Wincanton specific angle might put you off, but the SP similar horses, similarly priced horses, have done, as you can see, very well. So that might be a horse to be interested in. And again, you know, obviously it's up to each of us to make a judgment as to whether the price legitimizes the play, whether we want to get involved or not. But Paul Nicholls' first start is an interesting angle. This Jimmy Moffat trainer change one is quite striking. It's 41%. So 7 out of 17 horses he's inherited from another yard in the last 2 years have gone on to win on their first start for him. And an incredible 65% of them have made the frame. And they weren't small prices. So again, if we click this little arrow, this little up arrow, little hat, we can see the nature of these, and we can also see that this is a timeline from most recent to well, basically 2 years ago, and we can see that in the last year and a half or so, most of them, or many of them, have won, and the prices have been 7-2, 16-1, 2-1, 9-2, 50-1, 9-2. And the vast majority of them were ridden by Charlotte Jones, who is Jimmy Moffat's go-to jockey, another very underrated lady rider, I think she claims 3 now. She's ridden a lot of winners. She's very experienced and she's a good jockey. So that's another. They're a combination to be aware of generally, but particularly it seems on trainer change. And if we click on anywhere in this row, we can see that the horse in question here is 1 Mil Harbour. So let's have a look at 1 Mil Harbour, who's running in the 4:45 at Carlisle. Excuse me. And we can see it's about a 6-to-1 chance. It's got a whopping 8 in my report angles. Report angles is not something I'm going to talk about here today, but you can find it in the user guide. You definitely should be using it. Definitely should be using it. If I click on this, it will tell you why this is interesting in the way I've set up my report angles, and you can see that a couple of the rows here relate to trainer change. So in the last 2 years, Jimmy on a trainer change is 40%, but we can see in the last 5 years he's still 32%. So trainer change, he really is capable of improving the horses that come into his possession or his stewardship. And we can see on the trainer snippets down here we've got race type chase, excellent record, the distance range, excellent record, the trainer change we've talked about, that's the same as this one, 60 plus day layoff, excellent record, trainer jockey, as we know, good record, trainer stats at the course 5 years, good record. What you don't normally see is black everywhere in these rightmost columns. If I just click on another, let's click on Rose Dobbin, and I'm not picking on her, it's just the next row up. You normally see lots of red like this. Now this is actually her record with at this distance is good, but what I wanted to highlight was that generally these horses are not profitable to follow, but in the case of Jimmy Moffat, they are all showing a good profit. That he's an underrated trainer, there's no two ways about that. And this 1 Mil Harbour is an interesting horse on a trainer change. That's highlighted very, very quickly with T-Snips with filters. These are the filters I use, but if there were a lot more rows of data in the report, then I would make the runs 25. Essentially I just get a bit more discerning, if you like, a bit more strict about the criteria, and then that's going to reduce the number of qualifiers here. So if I made this PRB 0.5 and the runs 15, I'm going to get a bit more data. If I made this 20%, I'm going to get a bit more data, a lot more data. So you can play around with these to get the number of runners that you want as a starting point, and then you can mess around with them to see where they take you. If you click this show hide inline button, it's going to show all of the runners. So for each row, it's basically opening up the rows to show you the runners involved. Okay, so that's that one. Form hack number 3 is Bet Finder. Now this is in our tools section. Bet Finder is here. Click on it and it will bring you to a page that looks very much like this. In fact, exactly like this. What you can see on this page is there's a large number of buttons and labels on those buttons, and each of them filters the overall number of runners today. So today there are 356 horses, and if I select, for instance, last time out place, it will reduce that to the 83 horses that were placed last time. If you're only interested in UK or Ireland or a specific race code or whatever, you can do stuff here to do that. If you only want handicaps, just click on the handicap only equals yes, and then that's narrowed that down to 256 runners. So I'm going to use everything for now. And really how you use this is entirely up to you. Which elements are important to you, you will select. So we've got some we've got trainer form, basic trainer form, positives and negatives, green and red, jockey and sire form, these are all positives, and then we've got some advanced trainer form positives and negatives here. Further up we've got data relating to first start, second start, first time in a handicap, second start in a handicap, first off a wind up, second off a wind up, first time with today's equipment, second time with today's equipment, first time gelded, second time gelded, and the trainer change. And then we've got ratings filters based around Racing Post rating, top speed, and our own Peter May SR figures. You can either select top rated or top 3 in the race that they're in today, and some basic filters up here. So again, it's entirely up to you how you use this. You can hide all of them and then just select the ones that you want, like that, if that's interesting to you, or open them all up with that one there. I'm going to select beaten favourite last time out, and you can see I've gone from 356 to 36 by doing that. I'm also going to say top 3 in the ratings, down to 20 when I select RPR, down to 13 when I select RPR and top speed, and down to 8 when I say I want it in the top 3 of all 3 ratings. And I'm going to say down in class as well. And I've now got 3 qualifiers. Now you might find that that takes you to 0. So if I put win shortlist, that takes me to 0 as an example. Obviously I then need to play around with things to get some data back in the view. Or if those are my default settings, then I'm going to say, alright, well there are no qualifiers today, there's no bet today, if that's you. So with these 5 filters selected, if I click on the qualifiers button, it's just very simply going to show me those 3 horses here, and I can go and look at the races and see if I think they're a bet today on that basis. They may or may not be. So that's it. That's Bet Finder. Very, very simple. You've got your filters, you choose the ones you want. It narrows the horses running today down to a manageable number. You then have the manageable number, and you can go and look at those horses and make a judgment about whether they're bettable at the price and in the race conditions that they face this afternoon or evening. Form hack number 4 is ratings sortation. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to this carefully selected race, the 540 at Brighton. So there's just a few runners in this race rather than a lot. We can see there are some non-runners, and that's because the going is soft. This is a 5 furlong 60 yard, 5.5-ish furlong handicap, and we're going to use the full form tab here. And what I'm going to do is I am going to select well, I'm actually not going to select anything. I'm going to use the Racing Post rating. So if you're not familiar with this, there's detail on the horse. You can play around with these filters. If you only wanted to look, for instance, at flat turf form, you could select that button there, and it's going to narrow down all of the form to specifically flat turf, and so on. And what I'm interested in is kind of ranking the past performances from best to worst. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use Racing Post rating. Now you can use any rating you like, but Racing Post rating is a historical rating. That is to say, it uses this figure here is based on this performance, 4th of 11, beaten 3 lengths in this race. So it's kind of telling us how the horse did that day specifically, whereas some of the other ratings might relate to, for instance, official rating relates to the level of form the horse had going into that race, and not necessarily how it performed in the race itself. Anyway, what I'm going to do basically for this form hack is I'm going to sort the horse form by Racing Post rating just by clicking on that one. And then I've got the perspective high to low here. And I can see in this badly selected example, a 50-year Storm, because the horse only has 6 runs to its name, that she's a filly, her best performance was in a 6 furlong all-weather race. Not exactly similar to today's conditions, but she did run well on soft ground, so that's a positive. Over 6 furlongs, that was her, in fact that was her joint top Racing Post rating of 75. She was beaten 2.5 lengths there in a 3-horse race, so kind of wouldn't want to get too definitive on the basis of that singular run. Her run on good to soft over 5 furlongs was a lot lower level, but then it looks like that may have been that was her first career start, so she's entitled to improve from that, for all that trainer Archie Watson can get them ready first time. Anyway, in this particular case, it's kind of hard to be definitive about whether her best form is against today's conditions, because after just 6 runs she's probably still improving. Let's go to another runner. We'll look at On Edge. Now On Edge is a non-runner today, and you will very quickly see why, because again you can see that the Racing Post rating data is sorted high to low, and we can see that all of On Edge's best form is on good or good to firm ground, pretty much, and the soft ground form is at 6 furlongs, pretty much. So we can see that this horse basically wants quicker ground, and today's conditions are not considered suitable. Fair enough. So that one's a non-runner. The one I thought was most interesting was Mary of Modena. Now this is another filly. She's had plenty of goes, 21 races, and we can see that her best form is on soft ground at 5 and 5.5 furlongs, including over this trip. This track, Brighton. And I thought that was interesting. And then if we look further down her form profile, we can see that in this race at Bath, which was 5 on soft, it was a big field there, and she seems to have done best in these kind of smaller fields, 5 runners, 7 runners, 8 runners. So we can see a bit of a profile here. It looks like she wants to lead or be prominent to show her best form, which she probably will be able to do here. I don't really want to look at the race in totality, but there's not an obviously huge amount of pace in the race, so Mary of Modena has a chance to be prominent at least, and maybe lead. And she was 7-1 when I bet her. She's now 9-2. That's because another of the horses that I wanted to be against at the price, El Tesoro, is now a non-runner, unfortunately. His form is good, is probably the best form in the race, not had many goes, but his form on soft ground is down here on his ratings profile, and his better form, as you can see, is on good or weather. So I wouldn't say he couldn't have won, but definitely he was a short enough price with that caveat. In any case, you can work through the race using this profile, and you can see whether today's conditions are well aligned to the best performances that the horse has shown just by sorting by one of the ratings columns. I usually use the Racing Post rating, and that is ratings sortation as full form hack number 4. And finally, form hack number 5 is our old friend Draw Pace Lone Speed. Now this is something for the all-weather through the winter season. Obviously during the flat season there's a lot more to go at, but in the winter we've got all-weather racing pretty much every day. And one of the great things about the all-weather racing is that there are lots of sprint handicaps, and they race with the exception of Newcastle and 5 furlongs at Southwell, they race around a turn. Now this bestows on some horses a considerable advantage, and on others a considerable disadvantage, and we need to take advantage of this inequality. Now there are lots of nuances to this, but the general principle is that if you have lone speed, if you're the only horse likely to go forward in a race, or if you have kind of an inside draw and early speed, then that's a powerful combination, almost regardless of your your horse's form credentials. So particularly in handicaps, it tends to be the case that the handicapper is trying to rate horses to group them, the ones of similar ability, into a race. So we can sort of assume that if a horse has a draw and pace advantage over its rivals today, then the fact that it's in, let's say, a 0 to 70 against other horses rated generally between 60 and 70 means that they're all, to some degree at least, much of a muchness, and the advantage bestowed by a favourable draw pace setup can be the deciding factor. So this is a novice race. I'm not really expecting anything to stand out here. Just to say, I've got it set up on heat map because it kind of emphasises the front end, the value of being on the front. You can see here historically in 7 furlong races at Chelmsford, there's a massive advantage to being a front runner, and some advantage to racing prominently. And then the further back you go, if you look at the sort of win percentages, we go from 22% to 16% to 11% to 7%. So, you know, it's worth flagging that horses can win from held up from the back of the field, but typically there are more horses that are held up and they win less often than those racing on the lead or prominently. And this is almost universally the case on the turning all-weather track, so it's always something to keep in mind. If you fancy a hold-up horse in a race, a turning track race on the all-weather, there'd better be plenty of pace for that hold-up horse to run at, otherwise he's pretty unlikely to get to the front where it matters. So this particular race is not interesting to us because lots of the horses haven't run, and the ones that have only run once and not shown early gate speed. We don't really know what's going to happen there. This handicap might be more interesting. This is a 7 furlong handicap, and we can see that there's a couple of horses that are most likely to go forward. One is Last Date and the other one is Golden Moon. Now Golden Moon, ridden by GG sponsored Marco Gianni, is drawn quite wide, but probably has a chance to get at least close to the lead to clear these horses inside if Marco decides to do that. Last Date has much less to worry about. He's got 2 steady enough starters inside, and probably figures to get to the rail on the lead. But we're not really looking at any out and out speedball here. We're looking at, Last Date probably will get a relatively uncontested sit either on or near the front of the pack, and we'd want to go and look at Last Date's form credentials. But if they largely stacked up, then that horse would be interesting as one that's going to be favoured by the run of the race. Compare that, for example, with a horse like Higher Law, who's going to be weighted with from the outside draw, and is only a 10 to 1 chance. Can win, of course. That 10 to 1 means a 9% chance of winning, 1 in 11. But wouldn't really be for me from that kind of draw pace setup. And we can whiz through the field quickly looking for horses of interest. So in this race, this is a 7 furlong race. We've got a couple that probably go forward here. Charlie Johnston's, particularly with Joe Fanning on, very, very often go forward and get stuck in as a case in point. Made in Kentucky with a sheen on, has the inside draw, and he's going to be first or second, quite likely, at the first turn. So, I'd look at both of them, but I'd probably be more interested on the inside drawn one there, who looks to have the best of the setup there. And again, we can see in this field size what that means in terms of win chance. 2 out of every 9 that get to the front go on to win. So maybe Sheen will try to do that from there. Even at the mile distance at Chelmsford, even in a relatively big field between 11 and 14 runners, we can see that those horses that lead win 12.5%, so that's 1 in 8 times. We can see that horses that led or raced prominently were favoured once more, and in this field it looks as though again the inside drawn mitigator, who likes to go forward, hasn't got any pace immediately outside in 2. Not really much until we get to kind of the wide drawn Shabs. Now Shabs probably will bid to go forward in order to overcome what is quite a difficult stall in 11. So I expect Shabs will go forward, but probably because he's got to go across the field from there to there, is unlikely to get in front of Mitigator, who just needs to go straight from stall 1. So again, Mitigator is a horse that looks like it's going to have a chance just solely based on draw and pace setup. And we can go through the card and look at all of these possible runners that are suited by the pace. It looks like there's 3 of them here, 2 inside. That would be an interesting race, but could be the speed could be quite well contested early there. I wouldn't be using that as a determining factor personally. In this mile and 6 race, we can see that those on the front in the longer distance races have fared less well, and it's those raced a bit more patiently, but perhaps not too patiently, that have done best. That's certainly not a race distance to focus on in this context. In the 8 o'clock, we've got a handicap 5 furlong race. There's bundles of early here. Now Qatar has a good draw in 3, is a habitual forward goer, and probably will get to the front, but whether he can be unpestered on the front with all of these other prominent or want the lead types, notwithstanding these are drawn wide, I'm not sure. Short enough price on the basis of this perceived pace contention. So again, this would be one where I'm kind of looking as much as possible for a lone speed angle, or certainly maybe 2, one of them drawn inside and the other one drawn outside, favouring the inside draw. I haven't really got that here. Now obviously Qatar can win this. He's more than a 25% chance on the current odds to do that. But this group here, at least some of whom are expected to charge forward, would temper enthusiasm. So that's something to look out for. As again, to reiterate the point, we're looking for a lone speed horse. We're looking for one horse, possibly 2, who we think will go forward and be left alone by the rest of the field. That's not the case here. And in this final race, the 10 furlong race, we can see that at that distance the advantage to front runners is kind of negated by the distance. So again, this wouldn't really be a race that I'd be interested in. But there's a couple earlier on in the evening that might be playable. Generally speaking, though, we want to be looking at draw and pace lone speed as a form hack in turning track all-weather handicaps this winter. So there they are, 5 form hacks that will hopefully shortcut your form reading process this winter and beyond. Now, if you're not already a GG's Gold subscriber, you can take advantage of our annual winter season ticket discount and get just over 6 months access for a single price. The details are all below. You'll have access to everything in the race cards, the reports, form tools. You'll be able to save your own strategies and report angles and do all sorts of research to suit yourself, or just use the form hacks that I've shown you here. This offer will take you all the way through to just after the Punchestown Festival. That's about the 4th of May 2024, I think. So 6.5 months access for the one price and a heavy discount at that. So if that's interesting to you, if you're not already a Gold subscriber, there are details below this video and you can get stuck in. We hope to see you on the inside. Bye for now.